Reserve. The root of all our evil, it begins with the Federal Reserve. Hey, yeah, well, let's go back in time when everybody was so proud of America.
I'm Tom Salmons. This is year 0. Today, Michael Harris joins me once again. We discuss COVID and the Supreme Court OSHA decision, as well as Hans Hermann Hoppe and a little bit of libertarian politics, local politics at the very end. So this will be an episode full of me screaming squirrel and going all over the place like a wild man because I cannot keep my thoughts in order. But I think it's a good one and you'll enjoy it. I always enjoy having Michael Harris on, so this was absolutely a lot of fun. RyanBunting.com for all of your graphic design needs. Go to RyanBunting.com. Ryan Bunting is a great libertarian and a great anarcho-capitalist. He's also a great graphic designer. He designed my podcast logo and helped Top Lobster in designing the t-shirt, the year 0 t-shirt you can get at the libertarianinstitute.org. So go to RyanBunting.com for all of your graphic design needs and check out his book, Project Manicore. It's a good one. Speaking of the Libertarian Institute, go to the libertarianinstitute.org for some great writers and great podcasts. We got Jim Bovard writing over there, sometimes some Ron Paul. You have Patrick McFarlane and Keith Knight and Kyle Anzalone and Scott Horton over at the Libertarian Institute. So go to the libertarianinstitute.org, check out the gear and the podcast, and read an article or two. There's all kinds of good stuff happening over at the Libertarian Institute. Look, man, it's things are crazy right now. The propaganda is insane. The gaslighting, the psyops are nuts. We have the Financial Times coming out with an article saying that psyops are crucial to battling disinformation and things of that nature. You got Joe Biden coming out begging big tech to censor voices that are speaking out against the regime. So we need to share podcasts regularly. We need to share each other's voices. We need to stop all this fucking infighting and quit being a bunch of goddamn pussies. Get out there, share these podcasts, and share everyone's podcast. Share Scott's podcast. Share the Libertarian Institute's links. Patrick McFarlane, Keith Knight, Kyle Anzalone, Pete Quinones, Dave Smith, Dan Smots, Dave Casey. They're all great podcasts. You know, Josh Smith. Share it all. Reed Coverdale, Liberty Lockdown. All of these podcasts are great, and they all have something to offer. And not one of us is right for everyone, but together, all of us can make a difference in fighting the COVID tyranny and the propaganda and all the shit that's getting shoved down our throats. So get out there, share these podcasts, do your part. We're in here. We're doing the work, man. We're boots on the ground, but we need y'all out there sharing these podcasts and utilizing the information that we're finding and talking about. And we need that information to get out to more people, because more people that hear this stuff, the more people that will be willing to fight back against the COVID tyranny and, you know, the Davos agenda and all these things. So don't forget to share the podcast. I can't say that enough. Share all of the podcasts to everyone you know. Thank you, Tom Burton, for the music. I'm done preaching. Enjoy the show. All right. I'm here with my favorite attorney, Mr. Michael Harris. How you doing, Bubba?
Oh, as I used to say in East Texas, fair to middling. An old cotton term.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to have you on because the Supreme Court had gotten together about this OSHA mandate and the healthcare worker mandate, and then just our luck, they came through with a decision before we recorded, so that worked out well for us. One of the things I wanted to ask you about, because I found this really strange before we get into the talking points that you have written down here, is when the attorneys, especially the attorney on the side of the people against the mandates, was making his argument, I don't have any other way of saying it other than the hyperventilating of like Sotomayor and Kagan. I was just like, y'all aren't doctors. This isn't even your job. It's like you're arguing the case for the state. Like why are you, that didn't make any sense to me.
I don't know what was going on with Justice Sotomayor, and which ironically, when it comes to criminal law issues, she's one of my favorite justices. You find out when you start studying Supreme Court opinions, you will love and hate the same justice for totally different reasons. There were several people with Justice Sotomayor just kind of like, what was your issue, woman? During what they call the oral argument phase. And I mean, I can tell you that I have had only one federal appellate oral argument. And I do think that sometimes justices will, on the appellate bench, they will chew you out to send a message to somebody else. So that does happen from time to time. But in particular with Justice Sotomayor during the oral arguments of the OSHA case, I didn't listen to him personally. I'm going by what I've heard from other people. But apparently she just created this fact out of nowhere that there were 100,000 children on ventilators in hospitals in America right now, which even the CDC is kind of like, no, that's not true. And
yeah. Well, and she also said that she doesn't understand the distinction between federal authority and state authority. Which
that's set off even among some of the more liberal legal community. I mean, we have this long-standing tradition of states have police power. The federal government does not have police power.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, just out of nowhere, Justice Sotomayor during oral arguments, it was kind of like, well, the federal government has police power under the 14th Amendment. And even a lot of legal scholars like, no, they don't. So and actually in both of the opinions related to the vaccine mandates, the other justices kind of went out of their way to say that the states have police power, the federal government doesn't.
Yeah, it was. I don't know, man. A lot of these arguments I hear when it comes to the Constitution, that people act like the 14th Amendment completely did away with the 9th and 10th Amendment. Yeah, I'm just like, I don't understand.
There is a line of people that make that argument that, yeah, the 14th Amendment basically just radically changed constitutional law. It's not something I personally agree with, but they do make that argument.
But in order, I don't know. I'm not like an attorney. So my question, I guess, is like, if they were wanting to get rid of or overturn the 9th and 10th Amendments, wouldn't they have to amend the amendments, like remove the amendments from the Constitution, like they did with the Prohibition Amendment?
Exactly. Yeah, that's my argument. Is I can't cite the numbers off the top of my head, but when they came up with the constitutional amendment to prohibit the sale and manufacture of alcohol, and then about a decade later, they came out with another amendment to like, we're just going to undo that one. So right. Yeah, I would make that argument that, yeah, if they're going to specifically undo a constitutional amendment, especially one of the first 10, they should have to take it to the states to specifically say that, oh yeah, we're going to undo this amendment.
Right, and that's like the argument that Dave Benner made in his book, "The 14th Amendment and the Incorporation Doctrine." Yeah, he was saying it's obvious that the 14th Amendment wasn't meant to incorporate all the states into obeying federal doctrine and the federal Constitution, because in order to do that, you would have had to amend the Ninth and 10th Amendment. You know, especially the Ninth Amendment, which is often overlooked.
Deliberately overlooked, by the way.
Right. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Don't, as much as they give lip service to wanting the people to have the power, they certainly don't want the people to have the power.
Oh no, that's that's a thing of. It was hard for me to adjust as a trial lawyer when it came to making appellate arguments. I tell people, I was told that making appellate arguments is kind of like NFL quarterbacks going through their progressions. You know, NFL quarterbacks, I don't know if you watch football, but they have the deep route that can possibly score the touchdown. Then they have the intermediate routes that can gain 10 yards, an intermediate route that can gain 5 yards. And then they have what they call their hot read, which is basically to try to avoid a sack.
A lot of times that's a screen, yeah.
Yeah, so trial lawyers like me, we tend to think in terms of the deep pass that's going to score a touchdown and change the game and win the game for us. Whereas appellate lawyers think in terms of, I don't want to get sacked. So basically, it's kind of their knee-jerk fallback position is, I don't want to get sacked.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's it's important to keep that in mind. And also, I think in particular with the Supreme Court, that they are haunted by when Franklin Delano Roosevelt deliberately tried to pack the Supreme Court by coming up with 6 new Supreme Court justices to legalize his New Deal agenda. So, yeah, there was a famous case, we call it the switch in time that saved 9.
Yeah.
Where two Supreme Court justices deliberately changed their position on the Commerce Clause to kind of like pacify Franklin Roosevelt. So yeah, I think that is kind of a lurking issue at all times with the Supreme Court.
Yeah, it definitely is, and it's something that a lot of people are actually saying, because you know they're supposed to take on the idea of abortions and here in June or July of this year as well, and make a ruling on that case. I think on that Mississippi case. And then
the Mississippi case is coming down the pipe.
Right. And then after this OSHA mandate got overturned, a lot of people are saying that they think that it's going to be the year for a real big push for court packing this year, which wouldn't shock me at all. The way that politics is played nowadays, and as political as the court system has become. Has it always been so political? I don't know the history of it.
Oh no. Well, the ironic thing in our history, and you know I'm a history geek.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I asked.
Yeah, it's ironically when they created the U.S. Supreme Court, most of the people didn't want to get on it. It was so political that it was considered like a career ender to be put on the Supreme Court. And actually, of the original members of the first United States Supreme Court, one of them resigned from the Supreme Court so he could run for the state legislature. That's how little they.
I remember hearing about that.
Yeah. It wasn't until Justice Marshall got on the Supreme Court in 1800 that they really started to change the nature of the United States Supreme Court.
Right. Yeah. Well, and I think, okay, so let's get into some of these notes a little bit. Those talking points were on my mind this week whenever I was thinking about what I wanted to talk to you about. And I was like, I want to ask him some of this stuff because it's really bugging me, especially about the 9th and 10th Amendment. I just like, it drives me crazy. I'm just like, okay, I don't know how they square that circle in their minds. I can't quite put that together. But cognitive dissonance is a hell of a drug, you know? So
Oh yes, it's they're very good at deliberately not saying certain things.
Yeah,
Okay,
exactly.
So, to give you a sports analogy, I don't know if you ever watched any college basketball, but back in the 1970s, UCLA was the powerhouse college basketball team, and they had a head coach named John Wooden who was universally loved and respected and admired for being a straight shooter running a clean program. And many years after he died, some of the players is kind of like, oh yeah, we had business people giving us cash payments under the table. And it's kind of like, did Coach Wooden know about this? And they said, Coach Wooden chose not to know about it.
Yeah, right.
It's like, okay.
Out of sight, out of mind, you know?
Yeah. So that's kind of the way United States Supreme Court is about the 9th and 10th Amendment. It's kind of like they deliberately choose not to recognize them.
So here in your notes, I mean, I think we can just kind of brush over this first point about vaccines being an individual choice. I mean, I think pretty much anybody that listens to this podcast would agree with that. And you and I are going to be in complete agreement on that. You know, like that's something, as far as I'm concerned, I hear Tim Pool say it all the time. So it's almost feels like cliche now, but that's between you and your doctor. That's not, I don't think anybody else should have a right to tell you what to put into your body. You know, it just doesn't seem like a legitimate argument in any way, shape, or form, that the government would have the right to tell you that, because I mean that's such a personal decision as to what goes into your body that it feels like dirty to even start crossing that line.
Well, I can tell you that sources I listened to who really watched the Supreme Court say that Justice Gorsuch had strongly hinted that he felt that way, but that he knew that he was not going to have 5 votes at this time. So he decided to push other issues.
Yeah, and the argument that came down from, maybe this goes back to your NFL analogy about how different attorneys argue based upon their line of work, right? But I felt like the argument that was laid out against the mandate was kind of soft. It was like, okay, like it was pretty obvious as the judges were questioning and commenting on the arguments, it was pretty obvious how that was going to come down. I really didn't have any worries whatsoever about how the decision was going to come down, but it really felt like the attorney that was arguing against the mandate didn't really go for it. It was when I listened, and I didn't listen to the entire 3.5 hours, but what I did listen to, I just felt like, especially I think his name was Yost, I think was the attorney's name. I really felt like it was just a weak argument. Like he wasn't really putting forth a great argument like for individual liberty or anything like that. It was just kind of like, yeah, we know these people have power. Like the government has the power to do this, just not in this way. That's kind of what it felt like he was arguing.
Well, I can tell you that I listened to a podcast interview of his wife, who's also a lawyer, by the way. Mm-hmm. And she basically saying that, look, he just wanted to win the case. And kind of like he felt confident that he was going to win the case on this point. So he focused his energy on this point. And I can tell you, based on the one federal appellate argument that I made, you really kind of have to pick your points because you're not given unlimited time. Okay, right. So you got a very limited amount of time that you're given. Now, the case I did was appeal from a federal drug conspiracy trial, and I have a serious problem with what they call ghost dope in the federal system, which I won't go down that rabbit hole too much unless you want me to. And I told
probably another show.
Yeah, I know that. I told him point blank, the other people involved in the case, oh, look, I am not going to New Orleans, stand in front of the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeal and not say my piece about how I think ghost dope is a bunch of BS in the federal system. Okay, so y'all just accept the fact that I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
And did I win that case? No, I didn't. I mean, I was going to lose anyway, and I knew it. But I will say that I felt like a subsequent case I had after that is kind of like, we're not going to give Harris another opportunity to go to New Orleans and rant about the ghost dope. Okay, so take that for whatever.
So yeah, I guess I was just disappointed in that the idea of the constitutionality of OSHA in itself never came up. It was just not even mentioned. And I was just kind of like, where is the authority? Like, where did they get this authority? They're just granting themselves authority. And it goes back to that Spooner quote. Like, it's either allowed for such a government as we have, or it's been, unable to stop it, powerless to stop the government from expanding its powers to this extent. And that's kind of, the way it comes across when a lot of times when you're listening to these arguments in front of the Supreme Court, because now it's like, okay, so what is Joe Biden going to do? Is he going to try to get another bureaucracy to mandate it? And is it just going to keep going and going and going? Because they never said, well, it's unconstitutional. You can't, like, the federal government doesn't have the power to regulate, the private companies. They don't have the power to be involved in the day-to-day operations of private companies. And so without saying that they don't have that power constitutionally, you're leaving the door open for them to keep trying to backdoor this decision.
Well, I mean, it is important to point out that the Supreme Court gets to pick and choose what cases they hear. So there were other people, numerous lawsuits filed relating to the Biden vaccine mandate issue. I'm told several of them did try to make like Commerce Clause questions, whether it should be reviewed under strict scrutiny or not. And the Supreme Court, out of the hundreds of cases that were filed, the Supreme Court specifically picked these two. Mm-hmm. And I think they very deliberately picked these two, like one so they could shut down the big overwhelming one, and another so they can uphold a much narrower, so they couldn't be accused in the mainstream media press of being just a bunch of anti-vaccine fanatics who were deliberately trying to kill grandma and so forth and so forth.
Yeah. Okay. So you have here in your notes, you said the timing of the vaccine news set off your Rothbard radar. So what did you mean by that?
Okay. Well, I mean, for those of you who are new to the podcast, I was a former student of Murray Rothbard. And if you've never read Murray Rothbard, you should definitely read Murray Rothbard. And so Agreed. He loved to talk about how businesses cooperate with politicians to make money and cut out their competition, do a lot. And so let's go back to November 2020. And we were still waiting to see the news of who was going to actually win the presidential election, because they were busy doing counting and recounting between Donald Trump and Joe Biden.
The real president and this puppet that's sitting in the office.
Like basically the man. And let's be honest, Joe Biden was basically elected because he was not Donald Trump. He was elected, he was anointed as president on a Saturday morning, late on a Saturday morning, basically to restore things to normal, quote unquote, restore things to normal. Yeah. Right? The vaccine. Pfizer announced that they had come out with the vaccine of the COVID virus at 9:00 on a Monday morning. Following that, So right off the bat, I call it my Rothbard radar of is kind of like, gee, the timing of that sure seems awful coincidental that they come out and publicly announce, less than 48 hours after Joe Biden is basically anointed as the next president.
Right.
And I do think it's worth pointing out that the value of Pfizer stock shares on November the 1st of 2020 was $38.31. As of the close yesterday, January 14th, 2022, the value of Pfizer stock is $54.95 a share. So that's damn near double the value of Pfizer stock shares.
I'm almost, I'm going to have to look at
awful coincidental to me.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to look at Moderna because I haven't even looked at Moderna because the federal government is I think the NIH actually is a co-owner of the mRNA patent with Moderna. So I'd be interested to see what the Moderna stock looks like. I haven't even looked at that. Yeah, no, you're right, and it was actually funny during that period because during the debates and all the press, every time Donald Trump had a press conference, he'd be like, yeah, we're really close to a vaccine. We're really close. It's like we're months away from it. Like it's going to be the quickest rollout of a vaccine that, that's ever happened. In the press, like CNN and MSNBC, even Kamala Harris was like, there's no way. And if they get a vaccine out this fast, there's no way I'm going to take it. I don't trust Trump enough to take his vaccine, without FDA approval and blah, 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 blah. But the vaccine companies didn't say a fucking word. They kept their mouths shut the entire time until it was announced that Biden won the presidency. And then suddenly, here it is. There's your vaccine. It was like, what the,
Yep.
and then you read that Time article, that came out where they said they fortified the election, and you're like, yeah, they sure as hell did on a lot of different fronts, So yeah, no, I can definitely see where you're coming from there because that was crazy. They just, as much as Trump would say, yeah, we're really close, it's coming out soon, the vaccine companies never would say anything. Pfizer and Moderna just kept their damn mouths shut up until Biden was announced the winner.
Well, in fairness now, let's be honest, Trump had a definite tendency to shoot his mouth off, and he was the master of what we call puffery, of building things up and building things up.
Right.
So,
no, absolutely. And I agree. But at the same time, these vaccine companies knew that he was telling the truth, that he was right, and so it was like, oh, okay.
But like I said, I just feel like the timing of the vaccine being announced was highly, highly
suspect.
Coincidental.
So you're talking here about is it pronounced Maloki Tsar?
Well, I'm told that in the former Soviet Union, they had a phrase, they call it the Maliki Tsar, which means the little czar.
Oh, okay.
And it was kind of a mocking, sneering thing, referred to some petty bureaucrat who was kind of king of their little domain, and you had to treat them like they were the king of their little domain.
Like a duke
and,
or something. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and what I see specifically with Anthony Fauci, he's what I, to me, is the embodiment of the American version of the Maliki Tsar. It's kind of like, hey, buddy, who elected you to make all these policy decisions? And what right do you have to come up and say that I am science? If you question me, then by definition, you're questioning science. As we in East Texas used to say, that hound don't hunt for me. Okay. So
yeah. The other day, I was laughing the other day because they were holding those hearings, and he was being questioned by Rand Paul, and this was just this week, and whoever, I don't know who it was that was in charge of the hearings, but she called him Senator Fauci. So I was like, I mean, that's what they think of him. That they act like he's.
Oh, wait.
Well,
he's the COVID.
Oh, he's the high priest. You know, this
Yeah.
is like, I mean, that's the way I look at it. He's the high priest. You know, it's like, geez, man, like this is, it's become so cultish that I just can't help but see all the like religious parallels in the way things go. It's like the vaccine is baptism. You know, your mask is your rosary. You know, I'm like, this is crazy, man.
Oh yeah, it's like he's the COVID Pope, and like you said, the vaccine is the baptism. The mask is your communion, and he's infallible. I mean, you can't question him because he's the COVID Pope. And,
Yeah, exactly.
yeah, he gets to tell Rand Paul like, "Oh no, we did not fund gain of functioning research because I get to define what gain of functioning research is. So if I say it's not gain of function, then therefore it's obviously not gain of function." You know, and
Yeah,
you
it's
can't
like
question me.
it's like so.
Yeah.
So with the testing and the manipulation of the existing virus to for it to gain function isn't gain of function. It's like you just it reminds me of that it reminds me of
Well,
that.
don't you understand, Tommy? That hey, Fauci gets to define the terms, so he
Yeah,
gets
I
to
mean-
define his own terms.
Yeah, well, that's
I
not
mean,
how
this is an
gain-
old legal trick. This is an old legal trick. You get to define your own definition of, I mean, Bill Clinton's phrase, I get to define what is means to me.
It
So you
depends on
can't
the
question
definition
it.
of what
And
is.
so, Yeah, so I mean, Fauci, in his mind, he's the molecule czar. He gets to define what gain of function is. So therefore, he gets to decide whether we did or did not fund gain of function. And oh, by the way, if you look in his history with the response to the AIDS outbreak in the 1980s, he was the only solution is a vaccine. Oh, wow. Where have we seen this playbook before?
Right.
So, yeah, if you look at his history of responding to AIDS, it was exactly the exact same playbook. And he decided right from the very first that the only solution to the coronavirus was a vaccine. Now, no therapeutics, no natural immunity. Oh no, we can't even consider these things. And of course, the mainstream media, they're his cult followers. So they followed along with, oh, ivermectin is just horse dewormer. Never mind the fact that the Nobel Prize gave the developers the Nobel Prize in Medicine for developing ivermectin. Oh no, it's horse dewormer. We have to have the vaccine. There can be no solution except the vaccine. And that is not scientific. Right?
No,
I mean, I'm a lawyer. I'm not a scientist. I'm not a medical doctor. Yet I have cross-examined doctors and medical professionals in courtrooms, in jury trials. And I can say that is not scientific. That is dogma. That is religion.
Yeah, it's not rocket brain surgery science here. I mean, you can use a little bit of common sense to figure out like, oh, these people aren't concerned about science at all when they're, shutting up scientists. They're demonizing anybody who questions, which as far as from what I can remember about science, it was all about questions. It was
it's all based on questioning. And like I said, I've cross-examined doctors on this point. Science is all about one person being able to pick up and look at the work of another person
and
compare it. The technical term is peer review. Right? If you don't have peer review, you don't have science.
Okay? Yeah, you should be able to duplicate. You have to be able to duplicate the process.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you bring up like the AIDS epidemic. I mean, if people haven't seen the movie The Dallas Buyers Club, that's a small purview of what the was going on with the AIDS epidemic in the 80s and what the people that were struggling to stay alive were going through. Like what Fauci did to these people is incredible. I just ordered the Robert F. Kennedy Jr. book on Dr. Fauci, actually. So hopefully that gets in pretty soon. So I keep ordering books. I need to start reading, I guess. So
I did get it. I did read it. And I will say I agree with Robert Kennedy on a lot of things, but I would have liked to have seen more like footnotes. It was more, in my opinion, political points.
Oh, really?
I mean, he does point out there was something called AZT, and I had the faintest idea what AZT stood for. But Fauci was promoting AZT as the only way to respond to AIDS and HIV. And there was a lot of people in the, particularly in the gay and lesbian community, who considered it poison. They literally called it poison. And they openly accused Anthony Fauci of poisoning the people that they loved.
Yeah, and I mean, this is a little bit off topic, but like it still has to do with everything that's going on. It's like the drug that they give people that test positive for HIV today is the drug that was being smuggled from Mexico back then. Like it's a variant of that drug. And so the reason that they weren't pushing that drug that was actually doing some good for these people that were testing positive for HIV is because the pharmaceutical companies weren't making it. It was some no-name in Mexico that was creating it. And so like the pharmaceutical companies weren't getting the benefit of the doubt. And so this is something that I've been saying since the beginning of this. The federal government, just like they did with the Affordable Care Act, is what they're doing is they are mandating that the American people subsidize these pharmaceutical companies, these big corporations, by either testing every week or getting their vaccine. One or the other, you're having to feed money into these pharmaceutical companies. Well, you know, that I can't square that circle in my head, because to me it just looks like cronyism. I don't see the health benefits of it. Like once it gets that, it's that blatant, I'm like, no, this is ridiculous. This is absurd. You know, I just can't square that circle. And I try to explain that to people, and they're like, yeah, but this is different. This is different. And I'm like, no, it's not different. Like the Omicron variant, you could have 3 fucking boosters and you're still getting it. You're not getting hospitalized. Why? Because it's the common cold. You know, and even the CDC has admitted that their PCR test can't tell the difference between the flu and COVID. And it's like, okay, so how many of these?
Well, I can tell you that.
Go ahead.
I can tell you that one of my cousins is a respiratory therapist in Oklahoma. And what he told me, and he's seen the worst, he's seen many of the worst cases. What he told me is when you show up at the hospital, they give you a test to see whether or not you have COVID. It says that test they give cannot tell you whether you have the original variant, whether you have the Delta variant, whether you have the Omicron variant, another con variant, or whatever variant they come up with next. All right. All it tells is that you do or do not have the coronavirus. So you can have a pregnant wife show up at the hospital about to give birth to a baby. They do a nose swab, and she could have a very mild form of the Omicron variant, and like, oh, this is a COVID case. So, you know, perfectly healthy 18-year-old woman, monitoring her health extremely well, monitoring her diet extremely well, can test positive for COVID, and it's a COVID hospitalization case. Mm-hmm. All right. So yeah, that is what I'm told by a firsthand source that I do know.
Well, they're admitting
now, as far as what's driving all this, what's behind all this, I mean, if you want me to go into that, I will. I mean, if you want me to just go straight into the Supreme Court opinions and the legal opinions, because I mean, I'm a lawyer, so that is my wheelhouse more. But if you want me to talk about the Bill Gates and Gavi and that, I'd be happy to do it.
Well, I mean, we don't have to. we can get back onto the Supreme Court
It's your
case.
show.
It's
It's your
like-
show, so you
I'm just ranting here because I'm just so fucking. This is so exhausting. Like, it's like
2 years.
you know, well,
This thing
yeah,
going on.
it's like you want to choke these people, man. It's I'm writing an article right now. I started working on it this morning before we got on the call, and I'm writing an article now about I'm calling it "The War for Your Mind," which isn't an original title, but it's just the gaslighting, the gaslighting, just constantly. Like if you would have said, like when I have a friend of mine who's a respiratory therapist that comes on my show. He's been on my show twice, and he was telling me at the beginning of 2020 or at the end of 2020, hey man, they're saying with COVID and because of COVID is the same thing. That's not the same thing, man. These people are coming in because of a broken arm and they're testing them and they have COVID. Like this is two different things going on here. And it's like, yeah, you know, he's seen people that committed suicide and they call it a COVID death. You know, it's like, what the fuck, dude? Like, it's infuriating. And now they're coming out and they're admitting it. Back then, you're a conspiracy theorist. Now it's okay. Now you can say it. You know, it's like, you people are crazy, man. Like, it's absurd.
Well, I will say, I think the tide is turning now. And now I will also say that I've been very disappointed in the Libertarian Party and Liberty movement the last 2 years for not speaking up and doing more.
Yeah.
I personally believe that what we're seeing now is part of the new. They milked the war on terror for all they possibly could. They realized they can't sell the American people in the world the war on terror anymore to keep up their global empire. So now they're switching to, I call it the biosecurity state, how we have to be afraid of every cotton picking virus and bacteria and global warming and all that. So that's the new justification for the global empire.
Yeah, that's what I've been saying. I'm like, 2020 will forever be known as the year they discovered germs. You know, I mean, it's just like you people are sorry. You know, it's crazy. And we'll get back to the Supreme Court, but I mean, I like talking with you. So, but what's crazy is my mom nursed my dad for that month. My dad was sick. My mom nursed my dad and she tested constantly for COVID and never tested positive. Not one time did she test positive. This whole shit show's been happening around me. Everybody around here has been getting Omicron and Delta and all this bullshit. I haven't been sick once. Not one time have I been sick. I've had sniffles, but I mean, that's seasonal for me. I have allergies. I'm allergic to damn near outside, for God's sake. Like, it's like, all right, like what the hell? And I smoke like a damn chimney and freaking drink beer and hang out. And I'm not exercising. I take vitamin D. That's all I do. Yeah, I mean, I eat well. My wife makes sure I eat well because she's just a beautiful woman. But it's just incredible that people are afraid, so terrified of a cold. I'm just like, okay, people died. I get it. But look at who died. Who were the people that were dying? There were people, if you look at the statistics, the death statistics from every year, they didn't even increase. They were the exact same. So the people that died of COVID were the people that were probably going to die anyway.
I think in the vast majority of cases, yeah. And I mean, I know 3 people that died over the last 2 years with COVID. One of them, good friend of mine. I'm not going to deny that I miss him, but by his own admission, he was lucky he didn't die of a heart attack 5 years ago. Yeah. All right. He had a bad heart.
I know more people that died from the vaccine.
I don't doubt it. I walked in and out of the jail in Kaufman and Dallas County the last 2 years. I've had some people who had it and told me they felt like they were going to die from it. And I've had some people tell me that I felt fine the whole time. I've had some people that tell me it's like, Mr. Harris, I've had hangovers that were worse than that. I like one guy in particular. He's kind of like just a dumb butt kid, did dumb butt kid stuff, and he was in jail and he got COVID, and he kind of like, yeah, I lost my sense of taste, but you know what? The food in jail sucks anyway. So what difference did it make?
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Now, me personally, I did have it in June. And it came on me very sudden. I did feel bad for 4 days. Right. And I did spend 4 days basically in bed and sitting on a toilet, but I was never short of breath. I never felt like I needed to be hospitalized. And it passed after 4 days. Now, yeah, it took out my thyroid gland. Mm-hmm. So I probably for the rest at age of 57, there's worse problems to have as far as I'm concerned. Okay. So,
yeah.
But to me, this big, huge uproar and fear. I mean, I saw a woman last week driving alone in her car with a mask on.
I see it all the time.
I wanted to just go hit her. Just go hit her. And it's like, what are you afraid you're going to lick your windshield or something at this time? Like, this is stupid. you know?
Well, I made a joke a while back because when I was still over the road, and I don't know if you're aware, but I'm working local now, so I'm home every day.
Yeah, tell me that. Yeah.
Yeah. So when I was still over the road, I was in New Orleans one time, and I'm trying to leave a Walmart parking lot because I just dropped a trailer off at Walmart, and I'm going to pull out, and this lady is driving 30 miles an hour in a 45. She's got a mask on, and she's making turns without using her turn signal. And I'm like, you're so concerned for your safety, aren't you? It's just, it was just the irony. I was like, yeah, the same people wearing masks while driving alone in a car aren't using their turn signal. It's like, okay. so
well,
I don't
can tell you, this is like a between Kaufman and Dallas County. For your listeners who don't know, of course, Dallas is a major urban area. Kaufman County is southeast of Dallas, and it's still pretty much rural. It's where I live. It's country, and it's like night and day different when I go into Dallas and I go into Kaufman.
Kaufman is that the Wills Point area?
My house is 6 miles south of Wills Point. Now,
okay.
Technically, the town of Wills Point is in Van Zandt County, which is another county over.
Okay.
But,
yeah, my aunt used to live in Wills Point years ago when I lived in Dallas when I was a kid.
Basically, Kaufman County is between Wills Point and Dallas. And
Gotcha.
Now it's to the point that when I go in Dallas, I tell people I feel like a saltwater fish in a freshwater pond. It's like, yeah, I can function here, but it's like, I don't belong here. Okay. I need to go back to where I belong.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I need to get you in I mean, way off topic now, but I need to get you and Legal Man on together because, both of y'all being attorneys in Texas, that would be a lot of fun to have you and
Well,
Legal Man.
I'm game. I'm
yeah,
game.
I'm sure he would be too. I'll have to set that up for here in the next couple of months. But all right. So back to the Supreme Court. so sorry, we got off topic.
Well, it's your show, so you drive it where you want to. You're the truck driver, and it's your show, so you drive us where you want to go. I'm along for the ride.
I'm dodging the mask wearers that aren't using their turn signals right now.
Okay.
So explain what is this NFIB versus OSHA? You said it was a 3-3-3 ruling from SCOTUS. What did you mean by
yes.
that?
Well, first of all, the legal world we work at, we use acronyms for everything now.
Yeah.
So NFIB stands for National Federation of Independent Businesses. I don't know anything about them. Okay. I just know they filed a suit challenging the Biden administration's mandate.
And that was the OSHA mandate.
Yeah, that was the OSHA mandate. Okay. The OSHA's occupational safety. I'm not entirely certain what OSHA stands for, but it's a federal agency.
It's the Occupational Safety and Hazard Association or something like that. It's Safety and Hazard. I know that's what the SH stands for. I've dealt with them all my life, and so has my mom. So,
Well, the reason why it's, I stole this from another attorney. They call it the 333 court now, that, the 9 Supreme Court justices. Apparently there's something sacred about the number 9 for the Supreme Court justices for some reason. You have the 3 justices that are considered the left Democrats. That's Justice Sotomayor, Justice Breyer, and Justice Kagan. And then you have what are considered the 3 Republican right-wing justices. Those are Gorsuch, who's my current favorite Supreme Court justice, Justice Thomas, and Justice Alito. And then you have the 3 moderate justices. That's the Chief Justice Roberts and the newer justices Kavanaugh and Barrett. Mm. And so the court is kind of split 3-3-3 to get 5 justices to rule. Is kind of like which way are the 3 in the middle going to go.
Well, that's kind of interesting because, the talking points that we hear all the time is it's a 6-3 court in favor of conservatives. I don't know any conservative that considers Roberts a conservative. I think they were hoping Kavanaugh and Amy Coney Barrett were conservatives, and maybe they lean a little more conservative than they do liberal. Maybe they're moderate, but they're a little bit more right-leaning. I don't know. I don't consider Gorsuch right-leaning, honestly. Maybe he is. I don't know. I don't guess I've ever thought about Gorsuch as a right-leaning justice. So that's
well, when it comes to justice, think in terms of like the tallest building in Wills Point, Texas. All right, so it's like the standard is pretty low. Now, I will say that what I know of Justice Gorsuch is that he's probably one of the more I consider libertarian, natural law oriented Supreme Court justices that we have. I'm told that Judge Napolitano, who's kind of a little bit of a legend in libertarian circles, he was the one that recommended Justice Gorsuch to Donald Trump. The story I'm told is that Steve Bannon is kind of like, oh, we can't get Gorsuch because he's too old. And Donald Trump looked at him and go, like, he's a hell of a lot younger than I am. And I will say that I think one of Donald Trump's more brilliant moves was when he come out and publicly announced his list of potential Supreme Court justices before the election in 2016. I think that was one of his more brilliant moves. And so I think it was Judge Napolitano who got Neil Gorsuch put on the list and the first one nominated by Donald Trump. Mm-hmm. And I'm told that Gorsuch, which strange irony, his mother used to be the head of the Environmental Protection Agency. So go figure that out. But apparently he was there's a legendary story at the time of the Constitution, because the Constitution was basically drafted behind closed doors. It was basically roughly 70 white male property owners that met in secret to write the United States Constitution. But of course, 2 of them were George Washington and Benjamin Franklin, who were the overwhelmingly favorite, most popular Americans. And legend has it that as Benjamin Franklin was leaving the final session, a woman in Philadelphia stopped him and said, "Dr. Franklin, what type of government did you create for us?" And according to legend, he told her, we gave you a republic. Now let's see if you can keep it. Yeah. And my understanding is Gorsuch that was a story that really meant a lot to Neil Gorsuch. It's kind of like, are we going to keep a republic or are we not going to keep a republic? So take that for whatever it's worth.
Yeah, for sure. I'm looking over some of this stuff.
Try not to have too much legalese in it, by the way. So
yeah, no, it's fine. It's not stumping me. I'm just kind of, you're talking about like pure curium, and you don't know where the line is, but OSHA definitely crossed it. So that's a good point there, because the thing about OSHA is, and it's always something that everybody that works in industrial or blue collar physical labor, you always have something to deal with OSHA. Like, they have some of the weirdest like regulations on the books, right? So I used to work at this company called Fox Metals and Alloys in Houston, and I was driving a truck for them. And there was a point when I was getting some these big 30-inch round steel bars loaded on my truck, right? And I'm trying to guide them on. And this guy swung the crane and the bar just barely went over my head. I mean, I could feel it touch my hair, you know? And as soon as that happened, my boss was like, okay, when you're loading a truck, you need to be wearing a hard hat just in case something happens. Now, as far as I'm concerned, when it comes to a 5,000 pound bar, if it's dropped on my fucking head, a hard hat's just something more for the medics to clean out of the skull before burying me, because that thing's not going to stop it. It's only rated to 400 PSI, which isn't much of anything. But what we found out shortly thereafter, when they made that rule of making people that were loading trucks wear hard hats, then suddenly we realized, oh wait, if one person is mandated to wear a hard hat on the yard, everybody outside on the yard has to wear a hard hat, whether they're in an area that is in danger or not. If you're outside of the office, out in the yard where all the loading and the machining's going on, you must wear a hard hat. So it's not just like they don't allow for you to use common sense or, hey, like, we're in a position that a hard hat might be necessary. If one person is mandated to wear a hard hat, everybody's mandated to wear a hard hat. So OSHA has this tendency to draw these broad rules and regulations, which is what the federal government does. You see this in trucking all the time when it comes to like your amount of time you're allowed to drive on the road. It's squarely 11 hours for everybody. It doesn't matter if you're 23-year-old and you're gung-ho and you can drive 18 hours in a day, no problem. They don't care. You're only allowed 11 hours, you know? And so you have this, and this is why it didn't shock me that the OSHA mandate was so broad, because I'm surprised actually that there was this arbitrary cutoff at 100, employees. It's like, what's the difference between a company that has 99 employees and 100 employees? They did the same thing with the ACA, right? If you had 50 employees, you had to provide them health care. Okay, so I'll only hire 49 fucking people. Like, whatever, it's just one of those things. And that's how OSHA operates. They're very broad. And that's how all these bureaucracies operate, is in this big, broad spectrum. And so it's your opinion that, and it sounds to me like that's the case also, that that Supreme Court overthrew this mandate because of how broad it was.
Oh yes, definitely. That's it's the nature of bureaucracy everywhere, that they tend to think in terms of one size fits all solutions to whatever bureaucratic problem comes up. And the analogy I like to use is, for people who are listening, I wear eyeglasses because I'm 57 years old. I've got a bad astigmatism in my left eye. So I wear eyeglasses. I have an eyeglass prescription that helps me read and helps me see. I think you have grandchildren, right, Tommy? Mm-hmm. So basically, if they come down with a regulation that said everybody has to wear eyeglasses, and they says, well, they have to wear the eyeglass prescription that Michael Ray Harris used. If they put my eyeglass prescription on your grandkids, they would probably think they were in like an amusement park funhouse and couldn't read, see the side of a barn. It would do them absolutely no good whatsoever. It'd probably do far more harm than good. but yet that's the way bureaucracies tend to approach things of, one size fits all solution. And in particular with the 333 opinion, and the first one they call it a per curiam opinion, which basically means nobody would put their name to it. I have no idea why. It would either have been Justice Roberts, Kavanaugh, or Barrett was the one that wrote what went down as the per curiam opinion of the court. Most likely it was Kavanaugh from sources I heard, but it's not really important, where they come up and basically said, OSHA is able to come up with workplace safety standards. The labor secretary does have the authority to come up with a workplace safety standards, yet they are not empowered to come up with broad public health mandates. That is not what their authority from Congress is. And it's kind of like, you know what? We don't know where the line is, but OSHA definitely crossed it. Now, according to the statute that created OSHA about 50 years ago, they are allowed to come up with what they call emergency temporary standards. Being lawyers, we call them ETSs. Mm-hmm. And the court pointed out that in the 50-year history of OSHA, 9 times they have come out with emergency temporary standards, like with COVID. COVID was the COVID vaccine mandate was the 9th time that they did this in 50 years. Of those 9 times, 6 of them were challenged in court. And guess how many times the OSHA emergency temporary standard has been upheld by the courts?
Never.
1.
Really?
1 time in 50 years. Yeah. So basically the majority come out is kind of like, this is pretty unusual to begin with, that, in 50 years that we've only upheld this 1 time. And so whoever wrote the per curiam opinion, blatantly, he called it a blunt instrument with no distinction for risk. They pointed out that, you could have a 19-year-old guy working as a landscaper outdoors in a healthy environment, and they're held to the same standard as a 70-year-old person working in a meat packing plant.
Right.
That's, they make no distinction whatsoever for potential risk that would be involved. And they went out of their way to say that COVID-19 is just simply not a workplace hazard. It can spread in the house, at your home, kids' schools, sporting events. I mean, how many of us have heard about super spreader events related to some political rally or press conference or something like that?
Yeah.
So this is not a workplace hazard in any shape, form, or fashion. And also something that they pointed out is kind of like, hey, getting this vaccine is not like wearing a hard hat. They didn't mention the hard hat part. Basically, what they said is, this is something you can't undo at the end of the
permanent.
work.
Yeah, that's a big deal, right? Like that to me was the biggest deal. I work with a guy, and I feel this was the moment I went from being angry to feeling bad for the people, like, right? Because for a long time, I was just angry at the people that were obeying and just going along to get along. I was like, you people are just, you're showing everyone how weak-willed you are. Like, no matter what you think, you're just, I'm just going to go along to get along. And, I read that book, Ordinary Men, about like how the average blue collar worker became a Nazi soldier executing, the Jews. And that's kind of like, and that's what made me angry. It's like, just that willingness to just go along to get along, it can lead to some really devastating effects on society and on people. So it's just really irritating. But a guy told me the other day, he was like, I don't know why we have to wear masks at work again. He's like, I got vaccinated, so I never had to wear a mask again. And I just looked at him and I said, did you really think that was going to work? And it was that moment where I started just feeling bad, because the average person isn't
knee deep in the rhetoric and in the propaganda like you and I are, right? We're studying this shit and looking at it and going, I don't know, and asking questions. The average person, is told something on the news, or they hear, a 20-second blurb on the radio or something like that, and they just accept it. Well, that's, this is what the authority is telling me. So I should probably take in advice, the advice of the authority, like I should probably use that. But
if you ever get a chance, y'all take a look at, they call it the Milgram Experiment. There was a psychologist that did study. His name was Milgram, where he had people administer electric shock, and it was a stage thing with an actor involved. But the authority figure in the lab coat was telling the participant, okay, you got to administer this electric shock. We're going to raise it up. You got to administer the electric shock. And the actor on the other is kind of like, I'm dying. Stop it, please. You're torturing me to death. Yeah. But it was something like 80% of the time when the authority figure in the lab told the participant, oh, you must administer this electric shock, this higher voltage, they went through with it.
Right.
Yeah.
There was also that one study. I can't remember what it was called, but they had the participants, they had these actors, and then they had the participant enter a lobby, right? And the actors would just randomly just stand up and then sit down, and stand up and sit down. Like there was like a bell or something, and they would stand up when the bell rang, and then they would sit down. And at first, the people were just kind of sitting around looking at them, and then they would start standing up and sitting down with the actors, right? And then they pull one actor out of the room and put in another participant. So that person would sit there. But by the end of it, it's all participants, and they're standing up and sitting down at the bell, and no one is asked, why are we standing up and sitting down? Like, what is going on? What does the bell mean? Why do we have to stand up and then sit down? Like, they just go along. And it's like, oh, okay. And that's kind of, there was that whole argument, and Google wiped their servers of anything having to do with mass formation psychosis, right? Because Dr. Robert Malone mentioned it on Joe Rogan, and Dr. Robert Malone, he's a thought criminal, because he's questioning, or is it good to give mRNA to children? I only invented it. I don't think this is the right thing to give to children. And so,
what would he know? He only played a major role in the
right. But this is how it's done. It's done on this really slow scale, and they kind of indoctrinate you into it like really slowly. And before you know it, everybody is standing up and sitting down, and anybody sitting there watching going, what the fuck? Why are you standing up and sitting down? Is just demonized, because these people don't know why they're standing up and sitting down. They just know you're not doing it, and that you're asking questions.
To me, even by criminal defense lawyers. I mean, early when they came out with the vaccine, there was a push that all us lawyers had to be vaccinated in order to go into the courthouse and go visit people in jail. And I spoke up like, hey, wait a second, folks. I was trained that my number one job as a court-appointed attorney was to point out weaknesses in the government's case. And here, even you criminal defense lawyers are just blindly, without question, following a mandate by government bureaucrats who have absolutely zero medical training whatsoever. I mean, aren't y'all even remotely questioning this? And I got verbally attacked in my group, and I just had one lawyer point blank where I told him, like, buddy, you know what? If you just blindly accept what the government tells you in a case, I'm glad you're not my attorney. And there were people that even among criminal defense lawyers who jumped on me, and I'm like, well, I'm sorry, but that's the way I feel, So I felt like there was a coordinated effort to sell this vaccine, to not even mention potential harmful side effects whatsoever, and to, as you called it, it's the baptism. It's the modern day version of a baptism,
right?
They have to force everybody to go through.
I was at work the other day, and one of my assistant managers, he was in the military, and so we're standing there, and someone said something about the masks, and I'm like, well, these masks don't work. And this guy turned around and goes, what do you mean? I was like, dude, I was in the military. I was taught that the only thing that works against biological agents in that are airborne is MOP 1 gear. This isn't MOP 1. This is a t-shirt over my face. And the guy, my assistant manager goes, oh my God, I was thinking the same thing the other day. And I'm like, yeah, man. And so the thing is, like, people are thinking this. They're just afraid to say anything. They're like, oh, well, this is what everybody else is doing. I guess I have to do it. And it's like, no, you can ask questions. It's okay. And so it's up to people like you and me to put ourselves in uncomfortable situations where people get mad and yell at us because we're actually paying attention and we're thinking about these things critically. And we're wondering, like, wait a second, this is strange. Like, what? Why are we doing this? This makes no sense, you know? And so it's just crazy. I can see the toll it's having on people. And I think that's why I feel so bad for them nowadays. I can see what it's doing to people emotionally and mentally. It's really grinding people down.
I've got serious questions with the United States of America is how much longer we're going to continue to function as a country. I mean, I don't know if it'll happen in my lifetime, but I can very definitely see the breakup into like various city states. Because like I said, to me, the difference between Dallas County and Kaufman County is like night and day. And
did you read that article that Jeff Deist wrote a couple of weeks ago about that?
No, I didn't.
I think it's called We Will Win or something like that. I'll find it's at Mises.org. I'll send it to you. It was good. But yeah, you're right.
I think that's something the Supreme Court, 6 of the 9 justices were, I think in particular Gorsuch is just kind of like, are we going to keep any semblance of a limited government republic, constitutional republic at all? If we are, and that's something Gorsuch in his, they call it the concurrence opinion, which current opinion basically means we agree with you, but for different reasons. Right. And Gorsuch with his concurrence basically said that it's up to state, local government, maybe Congress to decide how to respond to the pandemic. It is not up to this administrative agency in Washington that's charged with workplace safety standards. And he specifically mentioned the major questions doctrine, which kind of surprised me that not only did he mention it, but 2 other justices signed off on him coming up with the major questions doctrine, which basically holds that the people's elected representatives are the ones that have the power to make laws that govern us. Now,
why is it called the major questions doctrine? I was curious about that when I was reading over the notes.
Well, I mean, people criticize lawyers for not giving straight answers, so I'm going to give you a straight answer. I don't know. Okay. I believe because it's kind of like that's like the major question that needs to be answered is
who has the authority and where does it come from?
Yeah, where does the authority come from that makes the laws that govern people's behavior? And now, you and I being libertarians, I imagine most of the people listening to your podcast are libertarians. You would say, well, obviously, even though I know there's a lot of libertarians that think they're going to create Encapistan or Libertopia, where everybody just agrees they're going to follow the non-aggression principle, and never mind the fact that some version of the Somali butt-naked brigade is going to come kill the men and steal the women. That's just never going to happen. But the idea when they founded the United States is that the people that are closest in government, that are closest to the people and more responsive to the people, should be the one. Because that was one of the big rally cries when we revolted against Britain and the British monarchy. It was no taxation without representation. That right. The British monarchy just could impose these taxes on the American colonists with absolutely no say whatsoever by the American colonists. So that was one of the big rally cries. And so when they created a constitution, they wanted state and local government. And I can tell you, as someone who's largely made a career out of dealing with politicians and bureaucrats, I think as a rule, you're better off dealing with local, low-level politicians and bureaucrats that you know, instead of nationwide politicians and bureaucrats that you don't know.
Right.
That's been my past experience.
Yeah.
Few exceptions here and there, but
and I know everything that's been going on with COVID. It is changed not only my the way I address these subjects and these topics, but it's also changed kind of my perspective on dealing with politics. And I know that I'm not the only one. There have been a lot of us that considered ourselves ANCAPs and agorists, and still do theoretically and through the philosophy still adhere to that. But it's really pushed us into more of a corner to where we're like, okay, we're going to have to figure out how to engage politically in a way that preserves some semblance of this republic, because the republic is as many issues as are involved with being a republic. It is much better that we can dictate and govern ourselves at the local level and the state level than having the coastal cities and the coastal elites decide as a democracy for all of us exactly how we're going to live. And so it turns into this is versus ought, conversation within your own head. And you kind of have to discern and separate what is and what's actually realistic versus how it ought to be.
Yeah, it's I mean, you and I are Texans. I'm fourth generation Texan. So even though I've got issues with Texas Governor Greg Abbott, and I have a hell of a lot of issues with Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton, which you know about that from my past podcast, I will say that the past 2 years, I'm much happier that I live in Texas than New York or California from the stories I've heard. And this is a global thing too. I mean, I'm hearing horror stories from Australia where they're like literally beating people up and putting them in jail for not getting vaccinated.
Yeah.
My
sister-in-law
lives. This is like going on worldwide.
Yeah, my sister-in-law lives in New Zealand, which, I mean, you can't go to the grocery store, but you can have orgies of up to 25 people. And my mother-in-law lives in the UK. Right. So, yeah, we know all about what's going on. So it's worldwide. And, I know people like to push and say, well, the whole Great Reset idea is a conspiracy theory. And, to their credit, they changed the name of it from the Great Reset to the Davos Agenda when you go to the World Economic Forum's website. But they're talking about ushering in a global social contract, right? And they were talking about this before COVID.
Oh, yeah, this is part of the plan. And by the way, a conspiracy is nothing more than an agreement by two or more people to commit a crime. Bonnie and Clyde was a conspiracy to rob banks, all right? So just because they started the 1950s of labeling things as quote unquote conspiracy theory to basically discredit people like Murray Rothbard for pointing at the truth. All right. So just because they label it as conspiracy theory does not mean it's true. Like once upon a time, the Tuskegee syphilis study was labeled a conspiracy theory and dismissed. All right. Decades later, it turns out they were true the whole time. So yeah, there's some coordinated effort behind all this, and it was done before October 2019. Now, yeah. I have doubt that the Chinese government intentionally released this virus with the intended purpose to establish New World Order, but I do believe that in particular, Bill Gates, an organization called Gavi, stands for Global Alliance for Vaccine Immunization, that he pushed an agenda sometime around 2009, from the sources I've heard, is that he set up Gavi in Switzerland, and a local government that basically he had total control of, so they couldn't like monitor and go in his office with a search warrant, pull out his files and stuff like that. That he basically lobbied the World Health Organization to change the definition of what was and was not a pandemic. Yeah, I believe that happened. And oh, by the way, guess who owns 9% of the stock in Pfizer?
Yeah. Well, he also
Bill
owns,
Gates.
Yeah.
That's public record. That's the.
He also bought up 242,000 acres of farmland here in the last couple of years. So, you know, I mean,
I wouldn't doubt that one bit.
You know, and then Klaus Schwab, he wrote a book. He's the founder of the World Economic Forum. He wrote a book called COVID-19 and the Great Reset, right? And so these people they go by the Rahm Emanuel doctrine of never let a severe crisis go to waste.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yes.
You know, so it doesn't matter.
Oh yeah.
We're at the point where the virus is out there, right? And the narrative's out there, and all these lockdowns that are enriching, you know, the corporate structures at the expense of small business, and all these things are out there. They're happening. Whether it was planned or not is beside the point. You know, they're not going to let a crisis slide by. They have all these plans in place that they want to accomplish, and all they're looking for is the opportunity. So all COVID, even if COVID was accidentally, let's say it came from nature. Let's say, like, fuck the lab, you know, leak theory. Let's say it came from nature, right? It doesn't matter, because they were just waiting for something to give them the opportunity. And so that's what they're looking for. They're looking for a window of opportunity to do things, you know, whether it's stakeholder capitalism, whether it's ESG scores, whatever it may be, they're just looking for this window of opportunity. So when people like shrug things off to conspiracy theory, it's like, oh, well, conspiracy theory, yeah, there are people out there saying some absurd things. Well, don't listen to those people. Let's talk about like what's rational and reasonable to look at and say, okay, like this could make a difference, and this could change living the standard of life across the globe. And is it for the good or for the bad? Is it good in some cases and bad in others? Like, what are we looking at? And that's what we look at when we're looking at like the Supreme Court case. We're trying to figure out, like, why was it okay? Why is it okay for the government to require healthcare workers that are getting federal funds for Medicaid and Medicare, but they can't require these people? Well, part of the issue is they shouldn't be getting Medicaid and Medicare. And what you're going to see, and I put this out on a tweet last night, what you're going to see is you're going to start seeing more of the PMAs that you and I have talked about before, the private medical associations, where it's a membership kind of like deal. And you're going to see more of those pop up that aren't taking federal grants, aren't taking federal money, that they're doing everything on a private scale. And they're going to be the ones that people that don't get vaccinated go to, because the other hospitals, the other doctors, they're going to require that you're vaccinated to even walk into their office. You know, and things like that are going to happen. So you're going to see these parallel economies start popping up.
Well, there's people that openly have advocated that people who are unvaccinated should be denied health care.
Oh, yeah.
Now, I mean, in my particular case, like I said, I mean, first of all, I already had COVID. So as far as I'm concerned, I've got natural immunity. Number two, I have a thyroid condition now. And so I have serious questions of, if I did get the vaccine, what kind of effect would it have on my thyroid condition? I have very real, and as far as I'm concerned, legitimate reason to ask that question, because this has never been tested, by the way. This vaccine did not go through the normal testing procedures. As I heard once, it's kind of like ordinarily vaccines take about 10 years to approve because they have to go through animal testing. In this particular case, the animal testing is humans. All right, yes. we are the animal testing. And not only that, but they can't do what they call this placebo group to test the effect of people who just received a placebo because they put everybody through the vaccine. So they have absolutely no idea whatsoever what the effect of having compared to vaccinated versus unvaccinated.
Right.
And so, yeah, I have what I feel like a lot of legitimate. Man, I was able to briefly look at the case, the Supreme Court opinion that dealt with the healthcare workers. And even that one made an exception for people that had, for quote, medical or religious reasons.
Mm.
All right. So even that opinion did have some exceptions written into it.
Now they had to do that after the military scandal, right? Because like wasn't there a case prior to this where there were some soldiers that didn't want to get vaccinated due to religious reasons, and the military was going to discharge them, and the Supreme Court ruled no, you can't discharge them. They have that's an actual exemption. Didn't that happen not that long ago?
I don't know the details of that case. My understanding it was some Navy SEALs that said that they had religious
exemptions.
Exemption. They should have religious exemption, and my understanding is they filed the appropriate paperwork claiming they should have religious exemptions, and the Navy Department rejected all all of them whatsoever. And so my understanding is that I don't know whether it was Supreme Court or some other appellate court said, you know what, you can't sit up here and say that we're going to allow religious exemptions and then allow no religious exemptions. Okay?
Yeah, well, and that's an ongoing thing. I know people that have dealt with this that got letters from priests or preachers, you know, that hey, due to my religion, I don't take vaccines like this, you know, yada yada yada, etc. And their companies rejected the letter. They said, "Oh, we allow for religious exemptions, but yours isn't a legitimate reason. Yours isn't a legitimate religious exemption or whatever." So now it's just like
the court said, you know, you got to point at least to one case where you upheld a religious exemption in order to claim that you allow religious exemption.
Yeah, exactly. Just because
it's kind of like the Fauci not fun gain of function because I get to define what gain of function is.
Yes, exactly. I get to define what legitimate religious exemptions are. So, you know, like yours isn't legitimate. So, and I know people that's happened to, you know, and they've lost their jobs over that stuff.
Well, I can say in Texas that Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton has said that despite what Supreme Court has ruled in the with the healthcare workers, that as far as he's concerned, the state of Texas, they still can't mandate it, and that workers that get fired for refusing the vaccine can go through. I think it's the Texas Workforce Commission, something like that they can go through. Now, I'm not going to deny the fact that I think that Ken Paxton has a very definite political agenda that he's promoting. He's not doing this because he's a committed libertarian by any shape, form, or fashion. But for whatever,
well, that's going to put these healthcare facilities between a rock and a hard place, you know, because it's like, okay, if they allow these unvaccinated healthcare workers to continue working at their facilities, then they're going to lose their Medicaid and Medicare funding. But if they fire them, they're going to get sued. So it's like, all right, well, have fun with that, you know. So maybe that'll. Well, what I was going to say, maybe that'll cause the healthcare facilities to actually bring up more lawsuits, you know, and look for different ways of exempting themselves from losing their Medicaid and Medicare funding. I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen there. But that's going to be an interesting thing to watch and see how that unfolds.
I think a couple of things. First of all, the natural immunity is they're going to have to acknowledge at some point that people that have already had the virus have natural immunity that's superior to the vaccine. And also all the evidence points to the fact that this vaccine, even at best, does not stop the spread. It does not prevent you from getting COVID. It does not prevent you from spreading COVID. At best, it prevents you from being hospitalized for COVID. And plus, even at that, it's only effective for like 3 to 6 months anyway. So I think kind of like time is on our side now with this. Of course, I'm sure that they'll come up with some new variant in another 6 months. We'll be making the same arguments over and over again. But also, all the evidence points to the fact that this Omicron variant, while it spreads much more, it's much more transmissible. It's not near as deadly. That it's basically no more deadly than a common seasonal flu.
Right.
Actually, it's less deadly than that.
That was something that
they're comparing it with the common cold. They're not even saying it's as deadly as the flu. They're comparing it with the common cold. So, and I've also heard
something different.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Go ahead. Yeah, I was going to say that during the oral arguments, there was a lot of people that made a big stink because Justice Gorsuch said hundreds, thousands of people die every year from the flu. And they're trying to say that he said hundreds of thousands die every year from the seasonal flu. And like, no, basically, I've listened to the recording. There's not an of in there. He said hundreds, thousands of people every year die from seasonal flu.
Yeah.
So yeah, that came out. But that's a sign of how they distort reality, how they can bend reality.
My dogs just raided my office. So. So, yeah, no, well, and it's funny because, you know, what we were talking earlier, that cognitive dissonance is a hell of a drug. And one of the things I've heard people say is people that got vaccinated and got COVID and then died from COVID after being vaccinated, it would have been worse if they weren't vaccinated. It's like, how do you mean it would have been worse? They dead. How would it have been worse?
kind of like the old line that the operation was a success, but the patient died.
Yeah. It's like, it's just crazy, man. It's nuts.
It kind of reminds me of the old Monty Python Life of Brian. Did you ever see that movie where the stoning scene where if you keep saying, you're only making it worse by saying, Jehovah's like, I'm being stoned. How much worse can it be?
Yeah. It's just crazy. Some of the stuff is just nuts. I just watch it and I'm just like, do you hear yourself? Like, do you hear what you're saying? And then people just buy it. They're just, it would have been worse had they not been vaccinated. I'm like, how could it have been worse? They're dead. It couldn't have been worse. The damn virus killed them. Period. You know? All right. So here you said, there's not an administrative agency in Washington charged with workplace safety standards. So that's interesting. Let's touch on that for a second, because I think that's an interesting point that you make here.
Okay, well, you got to help me out. Well, basically, that's the carryover from the that it should be Congress. The state and local governments are the ones that have the power to decide how to respond to the pandemic, not this administrative agency in Washington. So basically, they didn't have the power to do that. Now, in the case Biden versus Missouri, which was one that dealt with the healthcare workers, they were kind of like, well, the people that administer Health and Human Services are the people that administer Medicare or Medicaid. So the majority, 5 of the justices said, yeah, they're the ones that are authorized to respond. And so they did have the power, according to 5 of the justices, that to say that, all right, you know what, if you're going to take Medicare or Medicaid money, that your employees have to be vaccinated.
Right. Well, and yeah, exactly. And I kind of felt like that just kind of made libertarians' points for us. It's like, as they give us, so shall they take it away. You're now you're under their control. When you start taking their money and their services, I mean, it's kind of hyperbole in this case, but I mean, you look at the whole death panel conversation that conservatives were having during the Obamacare, when Obamacare was coming through, like,
if they can dictate, well, if they're required to provide you with health care, then they can dictate what you are allowed to and not allowed to do, and if you are worthy of receiving health care based upon whether or not you followed their edicts. If you lived up to a standard of life, which is, here's another thing that I find funny. Everybody's so worried about COVID, but the one thing they don't tell anybody to do is exercise. It's like, don't try to get your health in order. Yeah, go ahead and be as fat as you want, So it's just, I don't know, man. This whole thing, I know I've kind of taken this whole show off the rails and didn't stick to the point, but like, as we talk about this, as we talk about it, I just think of more absurd shit to say. I'm like, oh my God.
When it comes to federal government money, I had a judge one time tell me years ago that anytime the feds come with money, there's always some kind of strings attached. He said sometimes those strings are very, very small, very barely visible spiderweb strings, and sometimes those strings are iron chains. And so when it comes to healthcare, I mean, to me, it's a very short step from saying that we're going to deny healthcare service to people who aren't vaccinated, saying, you know what, we're going to deny healthcare service to people who smoke cigarettes. We're going to deny healthcare services to people who drink beer. We're going to deny healthcare services to people who eat at McDonald's. We're going to deny healthcare services to people who don't take vitamins. Where do you draw that line when it comes to that?
Right.
And especially with these, and basically what the majority of the Supreme Court right now has told us is kind of like, you know what? It's up to the United States Congress to draw those lines. It is up to state and local governments to draw the lines. It is not up to some Anthony Fauci that's unelected to sum up here and create their own interpretations. And that ties into what's called the Chevron Doctrine, which if you want me to go into the Chevron Doctrine, I will.
Yeah, let's go ahead and explain that to us.
They didn't specifically come up. As Chevron was a famous case back in the 1980s where they challenged rulings by the Environmental Protection Agency. Ironically, Neil Gorsuch's mother was the person that come up with it. And Chevron, of course, a big major oil company, challenged some of EPA's regulations and interpretations. And basically the Supreme Court and what's called the Chevron Doctrine, for all practical purposes, said that administrative agencies could come up with their own interpretations of what their job and their rules are. And since then, these federal administrative agencies have just taken it and run with it. It's kind of the legal version of college sorority girls getting drunk and standing up on bars and showing their tits. Okay, it's just like they just flaunted the fact that they can just come up with their own interpretations. And in the dissents in the OSHA case, don't remember which of the justices, I think it was Breyer was the one that wrote it, was for all practical purposes, the dissent said OSHA can define workplace safety standards any way they want to. Period. I mean, basically they spent about 5 pages just saying that over and over and over again. All right. So, yeah.
Like Bart Simpson at the chalkboard.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, that's what's known as the Chevron Doctrine. And several people, and Gorsuch in particular, has specifically said that he's got serious questions about the Chevron Doctrine of these unelected bureaucrats being able to define their own power. Or as I like to say, Anthony Fauci being able to define gain of function and then say, no, we didn't fund gain of function. Yeah. Because I get to define what gain of function is.
Yeah, I get to decide. So
yeah,
it's man. Over the last couple of years, I've gone from thinking that these people are incompetent to that they're just plain evil and they're just going to do whatever they have to do to get as much power as they can, and they don't care who they hurt in the process. I can't I can't justify the incompetence argument anymore. I'm like, all right, yeah. It's kind of like when you go from being a minarchist to an anarchist, you eventually get to the point where you can't argue the minarchist argument anymore. Like, I've just gotten to the point where I can't argue incompetence anymore. I'm just like, all right, it's got to be intentional. Like, I just watch it and I'm just like, it's got to be intentional. Yeah, so it's just it makes it really hard for me to sometimes to have these conversations, because I'm just like, golly, man, how can you just sit back and watch this? It just drives me crazy.
Well, that's been what I tried to tell the libertarians that I was involved with the last 2 years. It's kind of like, don't y'all see what's going on here? Like, really? I mean, y'all sitting here, obsessed over Joe Biden smelling women's hair. Like, really? Really? That's what y'all are spending y'all's time worrying about and focusing on? Trying to recruit dissatisfied Democrats. Really? This is where you're spending all your time?
Well, yeah, but
good luck with that.
Hey, but sexual harassment is much worse than locking COVID patients up in nursing homes and killing tens of thousands of people. Like, don't you know this? Like sexual harassment is the worst thing in the world. Unless you're sexually harassing someone under the age of 18, then you're just a minor attracted person. Yeah, I mean, it's just, we're
into
fucking clown world, man.
It really is. I think that the American people are looking at the two-party system and basically see it as a clown fight, as Justin Amash called it, the partisan death spiral. Now, when it comes to the Supreme Court, when Justice Kennedy was on the bench, his response is that Congress simply isn't stepping up. Basically he called Congress dysfunctional, and he openly said Congress is not stepping up and addressing the tough issues, which I disagree with Justice Kennedy about that, but at least I will acknowledge that he had a valid point when he said Congress isn't stepping up and doing it. And in the OSHA opinion, whoever wrote the procurement opinion actually went out of their way to say that, you know what, in this case, the United States Congress has actually passed several pieces of legislation dealing with COVID-19. Hint, spending money they don't have. But at least Congress did speak on how to address the COVID pandemic. And they said absolutely nothing about mandating vaccines whatsoever. And they went out of their way to point out, the United States Senate actually voted, the majority of the United States Senate voted that they did not approve of a vaccine mandate.
Right.
So how can they come up and now and say that, oh yeah, we've got this mandate from Congress to do this, when the majority of the United States Senate like, no, we don't approve of this. Right. So that was pointed out in the majority opinion.
Well, okay, I want to get into one thing real quick, and then we'll call it quits, because I got to ask I can't say that you still are in touch with Hans Hermann Hoppe, but you do know him. You've met him.
I knew him 25 years ago.
Right. So I kind of want to ask this question of somebody that's been in contact with him at some point in time and kind of knows who he is. Was he right about monarchy being better than democracy? Because I'm starting to think we should just go back to a monarchy.
Well, I did. All right. So for your listeners, I was a student at University of Nevada, Las Vegas in the early 90s. And Murray Rothbard was there. And he said that a guy named Hans Hermann Hoppe, he was coming to Las Vegas because Murray was your quintessential New Yorker. Okay. He hated Vegas. He was as New York as they come. Yeah. He said, if I'm going to come to Las Vegas, I want Hans Hermann Hoppe to come with me and teach economics. Hans Hermann Hoppe is a German. When I was there, I did meet Hans Hermann Hoppe. I spent most of my time with Murray Rothbard, but I did encounter Hans Hermann Hoppe. He was much younger. So he was much more likely to hang out and drink beer with us and talk about stuff. But I really considered myself a Murray Rothbard student, not a Hans Hermann Hoppe student.
Yeah.
Hans made he used to make the argument that a monarchy was better than a democracy, because he was all into limited government.
Right.
And he made the argument that a government of one was inherently more limited than a government of a massive. He used to, with his German accent, he used to talk all about democracy. Democracy. You or not vote to take away his money. That's democracy. So yeah, he made the argument that you were better off under a constitutional monarchy than you were the vast majority of these quote unquote democracies, which had no respect for property rights or individual rights whatsoever. So yeah, I think that Hans made valid point. And actually, if you look at American history, most of the founders were pretty hostile to democracy. They really did not like or trust democracy.
Right.
Reason why we have the Electoral College is because they just flat did not trust democracies. So yeah,
I've kind of gotten to the point where I'm like, okay, if one person owns this, and they know that anything that goes bad is it's on them now. It's like if you own a property, right? And you have, let's say, 18 people living on your property. Anything that goes wrong on that property is on you, because that's your property. And it's kind of that idea of the private property owner being responsible for their own property. And then knowing that even in 10 years, when shit starts hitting the fan and inflation is going out of control, it is your policies that caused it, and you're the one who has to deal with the problem, right? And any issues that you occur upon your country is being passed down to your children. That is your legacy that you're leaving to your children for them to have to deal with. It's almost like there's this argument that when you look at it from an incentive structure, the monarch has more incentives to be a better at governance than democratically elected officials.
Well, you can look at history of course, Tsar Nicholas of Russia was the most notorious one who did a bad job as a monarch of running a government.
Right.
But
then you have Liechtenstein.
Yeah. So it's it can cut both ways. It's kind of like the Winston Churchill line that democracy is the worst form of government, except all the others that have been tried. So
maybe he was wrong and Hoppe was right. I'd like to hear that debate. Hoppe and Churchill debate. That would be awesome.
Well, I will say that Hans was absolutely brilliant. He's one of the most brilliant people I ever met in my entire life. I will say I felt like he was excessively proud of his German heritage. Tad bit a little uncomfortable with just how proud sometimes he was of his German heritage, but he definitely knew how to make points. He knew how to offend people. He was definitely not politically correct.
So these shit posters out there that love Hoppe, they're doing service to Hans's legacy then.
I really don't read them, to be honest with you. I mean, I can put you in contact with somebody who could really talk to you much better about Hans than I could if you're interested.
Okay, yeah, we'll have to do that. I know.
Okay, well, I'll give out a shout out to James Yohe. He's Yohe. He teaches, I think, in a Jew college in Alabama. He teaches, and Jim and I were at UNLV at the time when Murray and Hans were there, and so James Yohe really is like doing his part to carry on the legacy with Hans and Murray. Awesome. So I'll give out a shout out to Jim on that.
Oh, cool. Yeah. Well, yeah, we'll be in touch about getting me a guest on for a Hoppe episode. I haven't read a lot of his stuff. I do have a couple of books on audio of his that I listen to every once in a while. Not real long, but but yeah, I know a lot of people are big fans of Hoppe, especially here in the last couple of years. They're like, oh, okay, this guy's on to something, so.
He definitely knew how to make his points. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah. So, all right, well, let's call this one a quits since I couldn't stay on subject. I'm not going to say we, it's my fault. But
it's your show, and you're the truck driver, man. So you drive the truck. I'm just along for the ride, okay?
Oh, it's always fun talking to you, though. You got anything to plug that you want anybody to go check out? You running for office again or anything like that?
No. I have told people that I have zero interest in running for public office again. That I did learn not to shoot my mouth off about the lack of qualified libertarian candidates, but especially since my thyroid problem, I'm really trying to cut back and drift. Hopefully, there'll still be some semblance of a social security system in 10 years. So,
yeah,
just trying to live a country quiet life now.
Yeah. We got you know this Don Huffines guy? I was talking to Tho Bishop, and Tho Bishop told me he was a really good Ron Paul kind of guy. In that
I don't know him personally. I know Ron Paul speaks highly of him. He was a big Ron Paul supporter. For some bizarre reason, he's decided that he's going to take up the mantle of Donald Trump challenging the 2020 elections. And it's kind of like, dude, as governor of Texas, even if you did, Donald Trump took Texas pretty soundly. So I don't see what the point you're making here. But that's what he wants to do. That's his business.
Yeah. Well, I know he's primarying Abbott.
Greg Abbott. Yeah, he's running for governor. I will say that once upon a time, he was a big, huge Ron Paul supporter, and Ron Paul speaks very, very highly of him.
So does Tho Bishop. I've talked to Tho Bishop privately about him, and he speaks very highly of him too. He said he disagrees with him on, I think, the drug war. I think that's the only thing they disagree on. But if you agree on 90% of the policies, you're allies 90% of the time, as far as I'm concerned. So
yeah, that's pretty good. That's pretty good for somebody running for public office.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. We're not going to get a Rothbard in office anytime soon. As I've told several libertarians when I ran as the Texas Attorney General candidate, just like, y'all just need to. What Ron Paul showed us is Washington D.C. is not going to change Washington D.C. Okay, so Ron Paul should have showed us that very, very clearly. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I'm really seriously thinking about registering to vote. And just focusing on state and local elections, and not even voting on the national stage. Just focusing purely on the state and local elections, and trying to get more of the populists, right-wing candidates into office, at least locally, and therefore.
Well, I will say this: I think that if libertarians could band together and get involved in local politics, I think they could definitely have an influence. We're not going to get people elected. Okay. I mean, let's just be real. We are not going to win elections. And even if we do win elections, the two-party candidates are basically going to isolate us and shut us off to the side. I mean, it's already a thing in the United States Congress where they don't even allow members of the majority party to put up amendments to statutes,
right?
Let alone the minority party. Basically, in Congress, the minority party, basically, a committee meetings gets about like 2 minutes to ask questions. That's so. Yeah, I definitely feel like libertarians would be much better suited to applying things on state and local. Because I do feel like when I was involved, particularly in Kaufman County local politics, that I did move some things, got some things shut down on a local level.
Well, I mean, and there are libertarians that are running for local offices. You look at like Buck Johnson,
he's talking about running for city council there in Lockhart. So there are libertarians, doing some things. And I think in Lockhart, the way it's set up, you don't run under a party affiliation. But I think Buck would choose to run as a populist Republican, more of a paleo libertarian, kind of the 90s Rothbard strategy is the way Buck, approaches that subject. And so he wouldn't be running as a libertarian.
Murray Rothbard told me that when they first, because he was there, literally, he was in the room when they founded the Libertarian Party.
Yeah, and it was in David Nolan's living room, wasn't it?
I don't know whose living room it was off the top of my head, but I know Murray Rothbard was there. I think Ludwig von Mises was there too. I think he had died by that time.
It was 1971. I think Mises was dead by 71, yeah.
Right about that time, he was quite elderly, but Murray told me that, initially they actually did believe that they could win elections and actually get people in office. But he told me by December, basically what he told me was when Ron Paul first ran as the Libertarian Party candidate for president and lost, that's when Murray realized that, we have no chance of getting people elected as libertarians. LP, large L libertarians, that we basically have to move through one of the two parties.
Yeah.
So,
and that was that in 1988 when Ron Paul?
I think it was 88.
I think so.
I'm pretty certain it was 88.
Yeah. And it was after that he changed to Republican and he started running as a Republican.
Well, he had previously been elected as a Republican, I believe. But,
and then he ran for president as a libertarian.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And then, of course, in 2008, 2012, he ran as Republican.
Right. Yeah. So, yeah, and I know there are a lot of people that are really focused on that late Rothbard strategy from the 90s. Whenever he was working with the paleos and working with the right wing, and I think with candidates like Trump and Marjorie Taylor Greene and Gates, that they see this opportunity for people that maybe aren't perfect in their policies, but are at least more concerned with defeating the elites and getting this establishment and elitism out of DC and out of politics altogether. And they look at that as an opportunity to move in a more libertarian strategy in the long run. You know what I'm saying? So,
well, like I said, I mean, Donald Trump was certainly no libertarian. He had the amazing ability to basically show people what they wanted to see. I mean, he was a great salesman. He was absolutely, positively one of the all-time great salesmen. And I do think one of his most brilliant moves was when he publicly came out in 2016 and released his list of potential Supreme Court nominees before the election.
Yeah,
because I think a lot of the establishment Republican types looked at that list and said, you know what, we absolutely positively hate Hillary Clinton. And no matter how much we have questions about Donald Trump, at least if he's president, he's going to put these people on the Supreme Court.
Yeah. And
he did get 3 of the people on the Supreme Court.
Right.
And all 3 of those people did vote against the OSHA mandate. 2 out of the 3 voted against the healthcare worker mandate. So, at least he did accomplish that.
Yeah. Well, all right. I'm going to start recording here.
All right. Good talking to you, Tommy.
You too, Bubba.
Said you're just a slave. All your good intentions took you to your grave. Your pride is how they killed you. With the flag you wave just like a fool. They promised you a mountain, gifted you a stone, they demanded that you throw it into your neighbor's home and then seize all that they worked for and give it to the throne just like a tool. Well, as we all just stand in line and glorify new ways of being cruel, seems to me humanity is not something that they're teaching us in school. They dumbs down all around, propaganda, their pollution. They set a cage up on the stage, a facade for all solution. They build a wall, block them all from this mental institution. It's insane. Now they're writing their own rule books and they're crossing all their T's. They're fashioning their people to all wear beggars' knees. If you want a clean drink of water, well, you must say pretty please. It's all a game. As we all just stand in line and justify these crimes done in our names, it seems to me authority and tyranny are both one and the same. Well, it's time to change the channel. It's time to set things right. Make them all rot with fear in their beds at night. Devour all their worthless souls and sacrificial right, just like we should. Of those who are to blame, and we'll stack them up like cordwood, watch them sizzle on the flames for good. Well, as we all just stand in line waiting for some kind of Robin Hood, our liberty will never be until our right to freedom is understood.